So, who would have guessed? I want to talk about Dynamo today. Specifically, what it's been like learning him as someone who's still pretty new. It's not a guide, a tier list, really just an honest rundown as to what I've found about priorities and more importantly, the mistakes I've made that I think new players should probably be making too. If you're thinking about picking up Dynamo or you already are wondering if you're doing it right, this one's for you. Okay, so the first thing I really just want to jump into is why I picked Dynamo. Um, I think I like the idea of playing a support-ish role, plus or minus being able to push when I want to. I just don't just want to be full support. And I like to have the idea that I'm a key player, but not always desired to just focus on pure kills, right? Like the idea of more kills, the better. No. In this game, you need to play as a team. Um, the thing that stood out for me early is that in Dynamo isn't really a hero you can just run in and win fights with on pure mechanical skill alone. He's much more about setup, positioning, timing, which honestly makes him a harder hero to learn than I expected, but a more rewarding one once things started really clicking. So let's get into what I think actually matters when you're learning him. Early game priorities. Let's start with the early game because I think this is where new Dynamo players, myself included, get the most wrong. Priority one, don't treat him like a solo carry. My first instinct coming from other games was to go in and find fights and try to win them myself. That was the wrong mindset for this hero. Early game, your job is much more about safety, getting through laning, farming what you can, and starting to think about how your kit sets up for plays for later, not about winning 1v1s through mechanical skill, like I said before. Priority two, learn your ability cooldowns before you learn anything else. This sounds obvious, but what I mean specifically, know exactly how long you're vulnerable after using a certain ability. For instance, Singularity. That's going to last you 1 to 2 minutes. Because, and again, Singularity is just a random example. You don't really get that early on. But because early on I kept using an ability defensively or offensively, and then getting caught out with nothing left to respond with, knowing your own downtime is honestly more valuable early on than knowing what your abilities do. Priority three, itemization for survivability first. Because Dynamo's value comes from being alive to actually use his kit in a fight, not from raw early damage, I've found it's worth prioritizing a bit more survivability in the early item choices than I initially did. Things to be mindful of, extending because you feel safe. This was my single biggest early mistake. Dynamo has some tools that make you feel tankier or safer than you actually are. And I got caught out more than once pushing further than I should have because I overestimated how protected I actually was in that moment. Mid game priorities. Mid game is where Dynamo really starts to become about the team, not just your own lane. Priority one, map awareness over lane farming. Once you've hit mid game, I think the biggest shift in mindset is realizing your value isn't really in continuing to farm your own lane. It's knowing when a fight is starting elsewhere and whether your kit can actually change the outcome of it. Early on, I stayed farming too long because I felt productive, when rotating to help would have mattered more. Priority two, understanding your role in a group fight. This took me a while to actually internalize. Dynamo isn't usually a hero initiating fights by himself, or the hero cleaning up at the end. His value is much more in the middle of a fight, in the setup and follow up. Priority three, communication. A lot of what makes Dynamo strong depends on your team actually following up on what you set up. I learned this the hard way. Landing a good stun and then realizing nobody was in a position to capitalize on it feels genuinely bad. And it's not really a mechanical failure, it's a coordination one. If you're playing with people who can actually talk, use it. Call out when you're about to commit something. And if you're someone who doesn't like voice talk or even chatting, Unfortunately, you're going to have to get used to it because your teammates rely on this. You can't just play this game as a solo player. Going through solo without talking and relying on others to talk and them assuming what you are doing. That's just like if they had like a magic mirror or a magic ball to know what you're doing next. It's impossible. So you just have to push yourself out of that comfort zone. And I promise you, the more you put yourself in that situation, the more comfortable it will feel as well. Things to be mindful of: ability timing versus ability availability. Just because an ability is off cooldown doesn't mean it's the right moment to use it. I noticed I was using things reactively as soon as they came back up rather than actually waiting for the right window. That patience is something I'm still actively working on. Some example of this is I might use my singularity in moments where I'm just trying to catch one person when I could have saved it 1 minute later for catching three people in a team fight. And this goes back to map awareness and quickly looking at the map to see where the other enemy players are. Is it worth it using my ult and then having to wait another 2+ minutes for that to be useful again? Or should I see what my team can do here if I just do some quick stuns and save my ult for 2 to 3 players to catch in that AoE? So again, you're never going to be perfect with it, but this is just something to think about. Things to be mindful of: build adjustments based on the actual game state. If the enemy team is stacking a specific damage type or a specific threat, mid game is where you should be reacting to that with the item choices, not just following a build order that you looked up once. And I think this is where you break out from being a new player to being more of an experienced one. And this can take some time. So feel free to do your own research and watch other videos. Like I might even do a react video too on what are some good combinations or good counters to use pending on the enemy team's character. And I think, new players are not supposed to know that. Just follow a normal build and just learn map awareness, learn, I guess, what you do in different moments of the game and how to work as a team. That stuff comes later. It's a less of a priority, but then more of a priority as you become more confident with the game and you have more hours in it. All right, let's talk about late game priorities. Late game is genuinely the highest pressure phase for a hero like Dynamo because this is where impact potential is highest, but so is the cost of getting it wrong. Priority one: target prioritization. By late game, every use of your ultimate or your key abilities needs to be aimed at the target that actually swings the fight, not just whoever's the closest or easiest to hit. it- I've wasted big moments late game by going for a target that we didn't actually matter the outcome of the fight. So an example was last night. There was a random Billy on the other team who, to be honest, I was focusing him, but he wasn't the one swinging the fights. It was all other more tankier enemies. To be honest, it was actually Dorman. It was one of the best Dormans I've ever played against. He had like over 100k damage by the end of the game, and he was the one swinging the fight. So, whether you just take notice of player damage in the fight as well, that can show you who's putting the most pressure on your team and who you might need to start focusing on as well. Priority two: patience before commitment. This is the late game version of the timing point from mid game, but higher stakes. Waiting an extra second or two for the enemy team to group up or your own team to be in position is usually worth it, even though it can feel uncomfortable to sit there with a strong ability instead of using it in the moment. You can. Like I said before, I use my ulti sometimes way too early, and I like to use it on one person when I could just hold back and use it on the other team. Again, that's on map awareness. So always keep looking at your map. Always. It's like keeping your head down when you hit a golf ball. Priority three: know when not to engage. Something I've had to learn is that Dynamo isn't always the hero that should be starting a fight, even late game. Sometimes the right call is holding position and waiting for the enemy to make the first move. especially if your team's other damage dealers need the first opening to work with. Things to be mindful of. Your ultimate is a resource, not a reflex. Okay? Early in learning him, I was using his ulti basically as soon as it was up. I think, that's the single biggest thing separating a new Dynamo player from an experienced one, treating that ability as something to hold on for the moment, not something to spend the second it's available. I want to go over a few things as well to be mindful of. It doesn't really matter what part of the game it is, whether it's, early, mid, or late game. Don't tilt off one bad fight. Dynamo's impact depends a lot on timing and positioning, which means when it goes wrong, it can go visibly wrong. I've had games where one bad ultimate usage put me in my head for the rest of the match. I was just kicking myself. I was so angry, and I knew that my other teammates were like, "WTF? Why did he use that then?" That was a. We're all human. We're gonna make mistakes, and trust me, you are going to be putting 500 plus hours in this game before you're considered experienced. So the first 500 hours are supposed to be terrible and you're supposed to lose. You don't learn if you don't lose. Okay? Review your own fights afterward. I've found it useful to actually think back through the fights I lost or even the ones I won and ask whether my ability usage actually made sense rather than just moving on to the next game. That reflection is slower than just queuing into another match, but it's where I've actually found me self improving on my gameplay. Except that this hero is a real learning curve. I don't think Dynamo is a hero you pick up immediately and feel effective with. He's also, at least, not in my experience, there's a real gap between knowing what his abilities do and actually knowing when to use them. And that gap only closes with repetition. So, my honest breakdown of learning Dynamo is the priorities I think actually matter at each stage of the game and mistakes I'm still catching myself even making now. If you play Dynamo and you've got priorities or lessons I didn't touch on here, please tell me in the comments. I'm a new player. I'm slowly learning through these things, and this is just my take early on. There's hundreds of other videos out there talking about Dynamo and experts' opinions of Dynamo, but sometimes you just need to hear from the person who just played 5, 10 hours of it. I'd rather learn from people, put more time into this and heroes than I pretended that I've got it all figured out. If you're new here, I'm ZireTV, mostly known for RuneScape content. I'm currently working through Deadlock as a real beginner. So if you're on a similar journey, stick around because I'll keep making videos like this um, as I actually learn more. See you in the next one.